So yeah, you ready to go?
I am ready.
Wonderful. This is so good. Okay. Hello, we're back on the podcast, and we have another interview here. We're here with Lovkn. Hello, Lovkn. How's it going?
What is going on? It's going super well. Thanks.
Dude, that's so good. That's so good.
Yeah.
And we also have a video here. And so if you're listening through a podcast app, sorry you can't see things, but
you can imagine it.
You can, I guess, imagine. We're sitting on a couch right now, which is a beautiful experience.
Wow, I need to remember that we have a video rolling,
yes.
So I don't do something dumb.
There we go.
I don't know what I would do, but I'm thinking podcast, and I'm like audio.
Yeah.
Okay. No, there's video.
So don't pull out a sandwich or something halfway through the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You can do whatever dumb.
Yeah. And so we're here, and then kind of the process, I always just kind of look through my Spotify playlist, and I'm like, man, who would it be great to talk to for the podcast? And I figured the next one up is Lovkn. We just love all of his stuff. And it's just really fun, special music. And so I figured it'd be great to talk to the man behind the music. And so, I guess the first question for you is just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you kind of started up making music.
Yeah. Great question, Brett. Thanks for having me again. And super cool to even just hear that some of my songs made it to your playlist. It's always amazing to me that the places that God is putting the music, and yeah, man, because this Lovkn thing, it pretty much got started in 2018, and I started to write a lot of the songs in 2017 that would soon become the early Lovkn stuff. And I have an album on Spotify and online right now called I Will Not Refrain. And I would say it's even less of an album and more of just a collection of a bunch of random songs that I just put on, to this one collection. And they were songs kind of from this season of 2017 when I was writing. And what really Lovkn came out of was just a really intense season of my life on a personal level, and probably the hardest season of my life on a personal level. And it's really amazing to see that Lovkn and this musical ministry that it is really so much of a redemptive story and a kind of a beauty from ashes story, but basically I live here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I write and record and share inspiring content, I guess, and just share what I feel like God is leading me to share, and that comes out as music and it comes out as content through my social media, and I just see it so much as a ministry. I feel like music for me is just the vehicle that God has given me to bring the message of the gospel forth into this world. And so I see myself much more as a minister of the gospel than I identify as just purely as an artist or musician,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been doing that. I've been doing Lovkn the last few years, and yeah, I'm 27, and yeah, live down here, like I said, in the desert. So
that's awesome. That's crazy that you mentioned that too. We have a listener, good friend of mine, who lives in Arizona. I used to live there. I lived in Scottsdale.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I lived there when I was back.
Oh, wow. How long were you there?
2000. Probably 2011 to mid 2013.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. Cool. Yeah.
Went to Scottsdale Community College. Go Artichokes.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Go Artichokes.
Dude, SCC. Yeah, I have some friends who went there. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Small world.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, I love that. that you kind of talked about, this is like your natural way of sharing the gospel. And I feel like everyone has their natural like vehicle where Jesus just happens to just flow out of them, you know.
Yeah.
And if that's like their passion,
Yeah.
passion, like other passions, just comes out in so many different ways. And so
Yeah. Totally.
that for you, music is that thing. And
Yeah.
for me also, just it's interesting to see how you said that love can, most of the content came out of, for you, a really um, hard time.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting to hear how like most of your content is very upbeat and happy and like full of joy. Which
Yeah.
like whenever I listen to it, I'm like skipping around, you know. It's just like naturally like life-giving.
Mm.
And it's
Mm.
really cool to see how out of a time that seems like that's not even there,
Yeah.
that the outflow of that is positivity, and it is some,
Yeah.
which is a
Dude,
beautiful.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like you hit the nail on the head. I mean, because the thing is like I went through this season where, you know, I, I would say my song Kingdom Advance that is on this album Into Freedom that I have, it really says it really it says it the best, I think, and it became kind of the anthem to that season that I was in. And the chorus of that song says, I will sing when I don't want to sing, and I will dance when I don't want to dance. I
Mm,
will lift your name, Jesus, and watch your kingdom advance.
mm,
And what you pointed out there is something that I've heard before, commented about my music. And I went through this time where I really did have to like worship. It took everything inside of me to choose to worship God. And it was so much of like faith worship,
yeah,
you know, and like, and I think that we go through seasons in life when like, because it's just like relationship. Like if all you ever do is you know, pray to God or trust in God or worship God or say, God, you're so good, you're so great when things are good and when things are like
yeah,
going your way, then it's kind of one-sided. I mean, you know, and it's the moments when you're able to say like, you know, God, like I'm going to wake up this morning and I'm going to choose to worship you right now, even when things are looking way down for me. And like, and I'm not saying, I'm not about to say too that I was perfect in it, you know,
yeah,
and it's just
totally.
God's grace, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's amazing that you say that too. I think that's kind of what 2020's been like for me, of just, you know, being in
Yeah.
this place where, you know, things have been kind of going quote your way, um, and then you hit a really big wall, and it's leaning into God into those moments of just saying like, I know things are painful and things aren't going the way that I would expect them to, but I trust you beyond my own beliefs of how I think the world should be working. And I just love like your honesty there of like leaning in and really pushing in and like making
Mm.
yourself worship God in those moments and
mm,
to give thanks and to give praise. Because if not, then it's
Mm.
just like this gumball machine of I'm going to ask God for just all these things that I want, and then if it doesn't give me what I want, then I'm going to back out. And that's, you know, that's not really the right approach, I would say. But
Yeah.
I want to just add one other thing. I went up to a cabin recently, and I was actually listening to your album. I don't know the title of the album, but it's the one that's only piano music. And
Oh yeah. Before our time. Yeah.
core time is just,
yeah,
that's my homework music. So
I
yeah,
loved it.
Oh.
I was driving up, and you know, it was kind of an anxious part for me, just kind of being stuck in my head, and it just brought me so
Mm.
much peace in that moment of listening to,
Wow.
you know, no music, anything like that, and it's so cool to see how God works through even like how someone's playing a piano, and
Wow.
you know the
Yeah.
heart behind that. So I just want to say that was a really great experience of being able to hear that.
Man, I appreciate you saying that because before our time was so not really, it wasn't like this big strategic like forethought of, you know, that I was going to release this thing. And it really did come, I recorded all those songs and wrote and recorded them in, I think, June, throughout like late June of this year. And I was like, you know, I think it was really representative as well of kind of coming back into almost that similar season for me too this year, of kind of being like, and this time kind of being like, God, like, I don't really even have words, you know,
Yeah.
but, you know, these songs are just kind of like, you know, my offering right now. And to hear that there's something that has been able to go out and just, you know, something that I recorded, you know, in the room here with just like a mic on and nothing super intense and just kind of playing through. I mean, I mean, honestly, some of those songs I would have to like really listen to and relearn to even like be able to play them again, because a lot of them I just kind of recorded as I was writing them, you know?
I love
Wow.
that though. It's just off the cuff, right?
Yeah. Super off the cuff.
Huh. I love that. It seems like I know we've talked about this before, but it just reminds me of lamenting. It's a form of lament, you know? You
Yeah.
don't have words to say things, but you have a feeling of like just what would bring you peace in that moment. And that's so cool to know that that wasn't something that was pre-orchestrated or something that you had to practice. It was just like, all right, this is
Yeah.
what I'm feeling, and it's gonna take this form through,
Yeah.
you know. So that's cool.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess kind of working off of things like Before Our Time, and how that's kind of been a little bit of a musical outpouring, so to speak, of um, where we are in our current moment. Of you said it was in like June. So how have the last like 6 or so months, in the midst of coronavirus and all the other everything happening in the world, how has God been working in your life personally? Have you been seeing God move in and through you and through people around you over the last 6 or so months?
Yeah, man, it's a great question. This year, like I said a few moments ago, you know, it's been challenging. I've had my share of challenges. I feel like it's funny. I've been talking a lot. I've been mentioning this more and more to a few people, that like, I feel like a few weeks ago, there was like a shift of seasons, and like, I can't really explain what it is, but I just have this feeling of this like shift, like God just kind of like, you know, kind of like shifted me from one room to the other, like, you know, a few weeks ago. And where I'm at now is feeling really good. But where I was like most of this year, like I would say really from like March to the beginning of October, you know, it was taking my faith in a lot of ways back to basics. And I know that like God's just done that in so many ways with the church.
Yeah.
You know, he's done that with the church. He's, you know, stripped the big churches from, you know, their, you know, the big productions, and things have had to kind of look different. And like, I feel like it's an analogy for our hearts as well, you know, and in this year, you know, he's kind of like, for me, I've had to readdress some really basic things, and like, and just things like, and I'll, you can get more specific, just things like truths about God's grace and the covenant of grace that we're under, you know, and the covenant of grace, the covenant that says that we can wake up in the morning, and that it's not by my doing, but by faith, and saying I might have screwed up, but it's not about like, you know, it's never been about counting up and tallying up how many times you get it right. And I think really very often we do that, right? And it's so easy for us to tally those numbers up, and then to like start to, even if it's subconsciously, put our you know, our worth and our, you know, righteousness in it. And it's so like opposite of what Paul talks about, you know, in Galatians, and like, you know, and when we're thinking about it's waking up and realizing like, no, like that's when it takes true humility to be like, humility even isn't like, is almost like realizing that you may not come to this place internally of just like satisfaction of like being able to like feel like you've done something to make yourself right, you know?
Yeah.
And like, and that is what our flesh desires to feel. And like, and so for me realizing like, okay, God, like I'm waking up this morning and, you know, I, even though maybe so much of me wants to have a temptation to feel like, or wants to have this negative self-talk to say, well, you should have been doing this season better. You know, you should have done this season. You should have like taken more advantage or more opportunity to get your social media running or to do these other things this season. And like these sort of like looking back should have comments from your mind that are so like, you know, counterproductive to like a healthy life, that like you can basically put those things away and say, no, you know what? Like I am where I am, and God sees me and knows me right here today. And I am fully made righteous because of the blood of Jesus. And I'm loved and accepted by him, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those things, like this year, some stuff like that has happened. I spent a lot of time this year, like not writing. And as an artist, like, I think that it's really tempting to, as an artist, I've heard it said, and I think it's true, but there's seasons of input and seasons of output. And you're not always outputting, but like when you are in a time of input, it's important not to get so tunnel vision in that season and start to think like, oh, you know, you're never gonna create again, you know, or you're never gonna like, you know, do this again. And like, because maybe you're just not feeling super inspired, or maybe you're just getting input from the world around you. And the thing is I think some of the greatest artists are those who like are out and experiencing and living life. And I will say this too, like that was the thing for lovkn. I started making music, you know, when I was like 13 years old. And it took me until like I really had to experience some hard things in life to really start to like make music that was worth anything and that said anything, you know?
Yeah.
But
yeah, well, I think that's so incredibly true. Like you can't give what you don't have. And that's where people really run into a lot of trouble, is because they're trying to give so much that isn't even in them. You know, it's like there's like the analogy of like, how full is your bucket, you know? And so if your bucket is empty and you're trying to pour stuff out, nothing is going to come out, you know?
Totally.
But if God is filling up your bucket and you are attentive to that reality, you'll actually have something to pour out. And I feel that,
man,
at least for me, that this last season was really a similar thing of stepping back and saying, okay, is there actually anything in my bucket right now? And I think that was a question that took me a while to answer. And I think while I was answering it, God was filling up my bucket. And it was really, a time where, you know, I couldn't really do a lot of things. You know, all I really could do is just sit and be with myself and be with the Lord. And I find that when I was attentive to that reality, that naturally God was working more in my heart than I think he's really ever worked, or that I've noticed him working in years before.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to say too, like, if somebody's listening on here and you feel like you're coming out of this, you know, year like a failure, or you feel like you're coming out of this year having like, you know, maybe you did miss some opportunities, or maybe you did really kind of screw up in some ways, but like, just know that that doesn't have to define you, you know?
Yeah.
And I know that you walk, you know, you might feel like you walk with it, and you might feel like, you know, maybe some shame around that, but just remember, like, there's no shame or condemnation, you know, in Christ Jesus.
Mm.
And so like, just set it before him, and like, don't live your life in a way where you're constantly like I said before, looking back and living by your you know, I should have done this, you know, but look forward and know that like, this is all part of your testimony, and this is an opportunity for you to go forward and share like this aspect of your testimony, you know, like, and who knows how God's gonna use that, you know, going forward into the future. So
Absolutely. I love that. And I think maybe just to recap a little bit here on two things that both of you guys have talked about. You mentioned earlier of like back to basics, and you were talking about just alone time, sitting with God and letting him really speak to you in those moments. So that kind of leads me to my next question for you is, through this time, have you had like a critical Bible verse or Bible passage even, or Bible story that you have just seen in a new light in kind of being brought back to basics?
well, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think I it's interesting. I kind of started off this season, at the beginning of this year, with starting to read through the Old Testament,
Nice.
and
Love it.
and I just loved the books, the Old Testament, and reading through the stories of like, you know, the Chronicles and the books of the Kings, and I think there's so much like faith stirring stories that you read. But I got to a book recently, and I thought it was really just interesting, and just kind of God highlighted it to me in a new way. And I've been doing this thing, I just posted a little video about it, but just trying to like, as I open up the word, just kind of trying to pray more, like, you know, try to make it a habit to pray, like that God would speak to me and open up, you know, my heart and my mind to what he wants to say through the word, you know. And I think that that's just such an important thing to do. And when you do pray that, like, for when you, if somebody's on here and they feel like, you know, they've been reading the word and it's felt dry, or they feel like they don't know that they're hearing anything or can't get anything from it, you know, if you haven't, like, just try, you know, praying that God would speak to you, because he will. The word is living. And so that all to be said, I was going through the Old Testament in Lamentations, though, kind of a, you know, not really a book that I can imagine anyone being super excited to just like start reading. You know, it's a book of lament, that was, you know, written by Jeremiah, and it's just interesting because like 95%, I realized as I was reading it, it's not super long, but like 95% of this book is just talking about like the horrible state of like where things were with the Israelites being exiled to Babylon, and Jerusalem falling, you know, and just being destroyed as a city. And you know, and Jeremiah here, he is just like, you know, he's just lamenting over this and expressing it through his words and to God. And I think it's interesting because there comes like this little section here, and I'll read it. It's just in Lamentations 3 verse 21, and it says, "Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him." And I I love this verse, and I think it's one of these things where it's like we hear a lot of similar talk like that in the Psalms. I feel like this we hear similar language in the Psalms often, but like if you were to just pick apart from Lamentations that, those 5 verses or whatever right there, Lamentations 3:21 to 24, then you'd be missing so much of like what it probably took for him to come to this place of just saying that, and like writing that out. And it kind of just goes back to the theme of just what we were talking about earlier in the podcast about, worshiping in faith and doing things when you don't feel like doing them, and the strength that I can imagine it would have taken to just even come out and know the state of what everything is happening around you and around you in the world. And then just being able to say, but God, but this I call to mind. And I think it's interesting, the language that he uses there in the NIV that I'm reading, where he says, this I call to mind. And it's like he is calling to mind, he's choosing to call to mind this truth about God's character, and about who
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah.
And I think that like and proclaiming that. And I think that, realizing that walking through tough things this year and this season, I think it's important to look at books like this and read about books where like literally he's talking about like how the hunger and the starvation is so intense that like women, are eating their children, and like, and you're just like, wow, dang, this is so intense, but here we are calling to mind and having hope because of God's great love, so yeah, I mean, that's just an example of I think of an example of like this journey I've been on this year with doing things like reading through the Old Testament, trying to like pray to the Lord before reading and just ask him like, God, reveal something to me like new about this and show me something new about this. And he really has, and he does do that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can't help but think, just trying to kind of connect things in my mind, is you were talking a little earlier just about how this time I think is a lot of the like, I could have done this, like personally I look back, I'm like, man, I could have read so many more books or something. I could have immersed myself in so many things, but I didn't, and I can get down on myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can easily find my value in that reality, like, oh, I didn't up my value during this time where I could have done it, like
Yeah, for
I
sure.
didn't
For sure.
create myself to have higher value. And I'm just thinking back to, really the one of the general themes of the Old Testament is that our value doesn't come from ourselves, right? It comes from the fact that we are children of God. And I think that's really something that I've really been stewing in a lot in this season, is really this reality that like, I can do things, I can not do things, but in the end, what matters is not what I'm doing, but it matters who I'm associated with. It matters that I am personally a child of God. I look back and I see, like Noah's a drunkard, and you see Abraham is like so quick to run away from his wife, and you see David is a murderer and adulterer, and you see all these people where you're like, man, if their value was based on what they did, they would have very low value.
Yeah.
Man, it's so true.
But their value was just solely based on the fact that they were God's people.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a important truth for us to really constantly be going back to. Our value doesn't come from I did A, B, and C today, or I didn't do A, B, and C today, but it comes from the fact that, I am in relationship with the God of the universe.
It's finding extreme joy through that too, through that process. Like what you're saying with Lamentations, of it would be so easy for them to just focus on like, oh no, another mom ate their baby today, and like just only like hone in only on that and just live in this in grief. But like it really takes focus and attention to get out of that so easily like naturally sinful mindset of just focusing on the dread and the horror of life sometimes, and to actually like refocus upon the glory of God.
Yeah.
And be like, man, like,
Oh yeah.
I have to dwell on you. And I think once
Yeah.
those moments, that's
Mhm.
Yeah.
we're able to find peace, because we just see the miraculous wonder of what God is. And I love that. That's great.
Totally. No, it's super good. Yeah, and I mean, even just today, I started to read. I don't know if I'll commit through right now to like reading the entire book, but I started to open up because I was in that section of scripture, Ezekiel,
Commit.
and like, dude, like, what a wild book, first of all, and then also just like it's an example, I think, for me that like if you know Jesus, if you've invited him into your life as your Lord and Savior and you've
Yeah.
surrendered your life to him, like he you know, he wants to use your life and
Yep.
he wants to use you and your story and your testimony. And it's an example like here's an example in the beginning of Ezekiel, you know, where Ezekiel's this dude and like he's just like chilling by a river, you know, and then, you know, all of a sudden, like, you know, he sees this vision of God and God, you know, is calling him and saying, hey, I want you to go do this. I want you to be, you know,
Yeah.
I want you to go and do these wild signs. And I was talking with a friend about this earlier today too, about how like sometimes like God calls us to do things and we don't really understand, and we have a choice. I mean, we can like kind of question like or doubt or be like, well, God, I don't really, you know, in my wisdom, I don't really know why doing this would make sense, so I'm not going to do it. Or you could like do the thing and then realize later like, oh God, you actually really know what you're doing, you know, and like I should have just listened the whole time.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that also kind of reminds me of the calling of Moses. You know, Moses has
Yeah.
this burning bush encounter, and
Yeah.
and God is like, you know, I want to use you to redeem my people.
It's like, no, don't use me.
And yeah, and Moses is like bringing up all of his shortcomings, all these different things.
Oh yeah.
And you know, like, who am I to appeal before Pharaoh? This is in Exodus 3. You know, who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? And God just simply answers, I will be with you. You know, and it's such a solid truth where you're like, man, you know, I can constantly be thinking, who am I to do this? Who am I,
Mm,
you know, who am I to make music that other people would benefit from? Who am I
mm,
to do that? Who am I to do anything really? And God just simply answers, I'm with you. You know, that's
exactly.
that is your credibility. That is what
Yeah.
gives you the ability to do what you're doing.
So good.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I
It's
find
so
it
true.
that is like, that's it, you know, like I don't
Yeah.
have to feel like I have to bolster up my self resume,
Mm-mm.
because I only have one resume piece that matters, and that is the fact that God is with me.
As Paul said too, so that no man may boast, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Read Love Secrets. I don't know if you guys read Love Secrets yet.
I
By
have it on my
John.
shelf.
I've
It's
never
my
heard
next
this.
one. So
Oh man, yeah, get ready because I mean I'm in getting into, I haven't finished it, but like it's really, it just speaks a lot into this. If you're listening, like check out Love Secrets by John Mark Pantana, and it's a really special book, a really special way of like just like just further speaking into kind of like what we're saying here, like just like living out of this like knowledge of who you are, and like
mm,
and realizing that like you are chosen every day, you know, and God chooses you, and he's chosen to, you know, he's chosen you to the point of dying on the cross for you, right?
yeah,
And like so that you could live and that you could have life, and so, you know, and I do music, and that's one of the ways that God like works through my life. But like the thing is like there's no hierarchy of like ways that God can work through your life. Like you know, for you have to see and walk in like, well, what does God want to use you for and do for you, and whatever that, when you can lock into that, like it's going to feel so fulfilling and just right for you, you know. And so yeah, I think it's good.
Love that. Well, I think that brings us to our final question here. You've mentioned a few times to people listening, and you've given us a lot of knowledge bombs here, and I love it. I love that you're you're reaching out to people who are listening here, but I want to ask if you had one main message to give your listeners, the people who listen to the music, or even who are listening right now. What would you want your music to convey, or like, what is the music of, or the message of your music trying to convey to your listeners?
Yeah. You know, I think at the end of the day, my hope and desire has always been that people would just encounter the Lord's presence in my music. And, you know, sometimes that comes out of me singing a song of a declaration, sort of this outward energetic declaration of worship and praise. And sometimes that comes out of a song like, you know, like my last album, Pilot of My Own Life, which was a little bit more, I think, personal in some ways, but still very much so kind of like sharing testimony and sharing the ways that God, you know, bringing the perspective of Jesus into testimony and into life experience. And I think that, like, you know, I can't imagine going through life and just creating a bunch of music and an entire, you know, repertoire of albums, and that wouldn't like have a focus on bringing people in some, you know, closeness to Jesus. I want to do that lyrically. I want to do that with music that, you know, I can create with excellence, and, you know, that's creative and that sounds new, and also like just to really embrace like the personal cry of worship that comes out of my heart, you know. And I think that God's doing that a lot right now all over the world with artists. Is He's raising up to let out a unique sound of worship and a unique sound of praise, and that is a significant move of God that I believe is happening. And so, you know, I would just hope that my music would be able to inspire also artists to feel like they can do that as well. That feel like if they are, you know, they want to create music for Jesus and a sound of worship for Jesus, but they haven't felt like it's been done before, what they have in mind to do, or that they can't see a place where, you know, they're able to replicate, you know, a sound that they see. Like, if God has something, a unique sound for you to let out, like, let that out, you know, and go with that and roll with that off, because that's an authentic expression of your worship. And I think that that's really important. And I think that's something that the body is just craving and right now, and this next generation of young people will be craving, you know. They want to see you just praise God with your song, however that ends up coming out.
Be real with your worship.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Totally. And you know, and I think that really is our reality, is as we are, you know, as Christians, almost like temples for the Holy Spirit, that when people meet us, they are encountering God. And I think that really is a true reality. And so as we are pouring out what is in us, as we're pouring out our passions about who Jesus is, that people are then experiencing God. I think that really is important truth. And so I love it, man.
Yeah, totally, man. So,
wow. Well, lovkn, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. Really appreciate it.
of course.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's been an absolute
Yeah,
pleasure.
absolutely. Yeah, it was a blast to be with you guys, and thanks for what you're doing here with the podcast. And yeah, just hope you the best with going forward with these, and I'll be excited to share it when it drops.
There you go. Thanks, man.
Awesome.
Right back at you.
That's a wrap, folks. So we got
Sick.
it.